Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to my Ruby programming language courses. Here I'd like to describe your syntax and structure of this easy language, and at each lesson I will give all the details of structure and examples and their values after it is run. At the end of this course you will understand and you will write codes by using a Ruby programming language. So far I have described many details of this language, and we'll go on with our lessons with arrays, much more methods regarding with array. And right away I'd like to start our lesson. In this lesson 8 I'll go on with methods, array methods. Reverse is one of them. Here I define an array so as to include 4 members, and by means of this symbolism I add number 3 to my array, and after that I'd like to get it reversed manner by using this array dot reverse exclamation mark, and after that I here define another variable so as to include 2 dot dot 4 members, and here I'd like to print it the member with index number 1. So just let's make it run and see the result. So as the last at the last command I would like to get it printed index number 1, the member with index number 1. I can show you here our array will be reversed here, and we would like to get it printed the members starting from this one. So it's gonna print it this member. It is 6. So let's go with our next example. Hash structure. In our example, it's gonna give error. What's wrong with that? Okay. Here I define a structure here so as to include 4 members, and my variable result equals to initializes to 0. In this iteration I'd like to eliminate if it is even or not. That means I'd like to find out odd numbers, in fact. So after each iteration the variable result will be increased by y. So at the end of this iteration result will be printed. Okay. So the hash will be considered. This is the hash that to be considered, and just as you see, when we run this this snippet, 4 will be printed. Okay, like this. Let's go on with our next one. We go on with methods. So here I define say method, and within say method within this block I'd like to print out high, and this finishes the say block. And how to call it, how to recall it, we simply edit its name. I say I edit say, I script say, and let's see a result. As you expected, it's printed high on the screen. Just whatever you would like to be printed or you'd like to calculate it, you can code here, you can insert here, and after that by using parameter or without parameter, you can recall the method, and it's gonna print out, it's gonna calculate what it is desired within this block. In this example, I simply want to display it on the screen. So high is displayed once. Let's go on with our methods. Here my func is defined here, so as to how are you, and I simply recall it by scripting, by editing, entering its name. Once again, I'd like to show it, and how are you will be printed on the screen. And okay, there we go with our next example here. I'd like to show you function definition with parameters here. I here define a square function, accepting argument x. I'd like to calculate the square of it by multiplying it by itself. And I recall it with this argument, with this parameter. I use here number 8, so the result will be printed out as 64, as it is expected. 64, okay. Here I give another example here. I define a function a with argument b. I'd like to get it printed b divided by 2. If it is integer, it's gonna give integer value without remaining any value, and this is the end of this block. So I recall it by using integer 9, and I recall it by using a floating 9.0, 9.0. And just I'd like to show you, okay, as it is expected, this is actually is rounded up to 4, rounded down to 4, and here just I recall the result of this function by using a floating point number 9.0, and half of it equals to 4.5. Just you have to mention in type manner. I here gave another example by using multiple parameters for function definition. I here define a function, a sum function, addition function here, accepting 2 parameters like a and b. And here within this block I define a operation here, so as to print out as the sum of a and b, and our block ends here. And I recall this function by using 2 parameters like 7 and 4, and here I use once again by using 100.0 and 200. Just I'd like to see the result. Okay, this is 11, and this is 300.0. It's a floating point result because one of the arguments is a floating point, in fact. floating point type. And there we go with another example. I here define a function accepting three members, three arguments, and this is the command to be calculated as the sum of three members. And I here assign the numbers to all these three variables, so as to 2, 42, and 6. Here I recall this function with these parameters. So let's make it run and see the result. As it is expected, the result will be 50. Summation of addition of three numbers. Okay, I would like to show you an example here, function definition with default parameters here. Why we call it default? Because at the very beginning it's defined with a default value. For example, in our example here, b equals to 8, and this is another argument. And here I'd like to get it summed together with two members, and at the end of the block I assign 5 to our variable x, and I here recall some function with only one argument, so as to be the default parameter will be 8, and let's see the result for this snippet. So 5 plus 8 equals to 13, as it is expected. This is an example for function recall with default parameters. And here I define another function, do something with two default parameters. That means we can recall this function without assigning any parameter, because it's already defined as default parameters. And within this block, it's gonna print out, it's gonna calculate it, the multiplication of these two parameters. And when we run this function, we can obtain such result. Okay, 10 plus 42 equals to 420. And we go on with parameters. I define a function here with parameter x, comma y, and within the block I'd like to print out the sum of these two variables, arguments or other saying, and I recall it with such parameters, such arguments, I can say, and after that we get this result like this. 6 plus 9 equals to 15. Just look here, we do not use any parentheses here, because we have constructed some function here like this format. And let's see our last example for this lesson. I here define a greet function here, will accept name, and I here make a comparison. If name equals to empty, that means no entry, puts greeting, and else puts welcome and hash curly bracket name, curly bracket quotation mark, and this is if else structure, and I can recall it by mentioning its name. However, by means of this format, it's gonna expect user entry, and this keyword just will function for that. Gets dot chomp means user will enter some information at this step. Just we can run this and see the result. So just here I write my name, Hasan, and this the entry is not an empty one, so this branch will run, so it will written welcome on the screen, and after that my entry will be displayed. I'd like to use it once again without entering any thing, just an empty break, an empty entry, and the first part of this comparison will function because we didn't enter any character, any string, so the first line will be printed as greeting. So the guys, that was the end of this lesson. In our next lesson we'll go on with function definitions and other topics. I'd like to thank you for your spending time, for watching my Ruby programming lessons. Please do not forget to subscribe to my channel at YouTube. Thanks for your watching, and thanks for your kind interest. Bye bye.